Shocking new information in the case involving the deaths of Hollywood legend Gene Hackman, his wife Betsy Arakawa, and their dog. For the first time, we're seeing body cam video inside the couple's Santa Fe, New Mexico home after their bodies were found. We're also digging through the dozens of pages of information from authorities providing disturbing details in the investigation nearly 2 months after the couple died. One of the big pieces of new information is that the Hackman property had a rat problem. It was a rare rodent-carried disease that authorities say killed Hackman's wife and potentially started a chain of events that led to the actor's death and a mystery that went on for weeks. We're on the case presented by Law&Crime. I'm Stewart. When the medical examiner in New Mexico said the cause of death for Gene Hackman's wife, Betsy Arakawa, was a rare rodent-carried disease, it came as a shock. But now we're learning that the environment that the Hackmans lived in may mean the cause of death is not as surprising as once thought. In a major document dump, the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office released 65 pages of information, including dozens of accounts by first responders of what they saw the day they responded to the Hackmans' home and found them dead. Body cam video shows deputies walking through the home. Several rooms seemed cluttered. One of the dogs found alive in the house, standing guard over Arakawa's body.
I don't know, bro. I don't see any blunt force trauma.
We also have the initial results of an investigation of the property by the New Mexico Department of Health. It found rodent feces in all 3 garages on the property, and 3 sheds were accessible to rodents. The report notes that the main house did not have any rodent activity, but there were rodent traps found on the property. This is an important piece of information when you consider how Betsy Arakawa died. Here's the page that lists the causes of death for Betsy and Gene Hackman. It says that she died from hantavirus pulmonary syndrome. That is a rare infectious disease that's transmitted to humans by rodents through saliva, droppings, and even air particles. According to the Mayo Clinic, it begins with flu-like symptoms and then can progress to severe disease. The Department of Health in New Mexico says there's only been 156 cases of hantavirus in the last 50 years in the state, but more than 40% of those cases were fatal. It appears that Betsy was feeling flu-like symptoms around the time of her death. Her preliminary autopsy found that her lungs showed signs of infection and inflammation. Betsy was found in a bathroom of the Hackman house. She was on the floor with a space heater near her with pills and a prescription bottle on the counter. It appears that she had suddenly fallen. The couple's dog that died recently had surgery and was found in a crate, unable to get out. It died from either a lack of food, water, or a combination of the two. 2 other dogs were found alive. One of them was sitting just 5 feet away from Arakawa when authorities arrived. Betsy's death did cause some confusion for law enforcement. On March 7th, deputies said that Arakawa's last known moments were on February 11th. But then the cell phone data came back and it showed she likely died on the 12th. Arakawa made multiple phone calls to a local health clinic that day seeking care for the symptoms that she was feeling from hantavirus, thinking it was something else. Her cell phone showed that not only did she make phone calls to the clinic, but she made multiple searches on Google, researching COVID, the flu, nosebleeds, and dizziness. The BBC spoke with the head of that clinic called Cloudberry Health, who told them that Arakawa talked of congestion, but didn't mention breathing issues or chest pain. According to deputies, 65-year-old Betsy Arakawa died days before her husband, the 95-year-old Gene Hackman, passed away. Police believe that Hackman passed on February 18th. That's 6 days after his wife. He had a pacemaker that recorded its last event on that day. The medical examiner said that Hackman died of a combination of heart disease and Alzheimer's. Betsy was Hackman's main caretaker in his later years. The actor was found in a separate room from Arakawa with a walking cane and sunglasses nearby. It will forever be unclear if in his state he was aware that his wife had passed, as he lived in the house for nearly a week longer. Hackman also appeared to be dealing with flu-like symptoms at the time of Betsy's death. An email on Betsy's computer showed that she mentioned rescheduling a massage appointment because, quote, G woke up today with flu, cold-like symptoms, did a COVID test negative, but out of abundance of caution, I should cancel my appointment tomorrow and rebook, say in a couple weeks. Last week of February, if something is available, thank you, best, B. There's no evidence that Gene Hackman had hantavirus like his wife did. We have heard from many people about how private the Hackmans were in their later years, even though Gene's career made him a familiar face to millions around the world. I want to thank our sponsor, Experian, for sponsoring this episode of On the Case. Experian can help you stay on top of your finances. April, of course, is Financial Literacy Month, and Experian is all about that all year round. The first step to take control of your credit and finances is to download the Experian app. The app has tons of free tools at your fingertips to help you take control of your financial life, like your free FICO score, which can help you boost your FICO score instantly for free with Experian Boost, free access to a marketplace of credit card, loan, and auto insurance options matched to you, free credit monitoring, with real-time alerts to keep you in the know on changes to your Experian credit profile. And let's not forget, you can easily freeze your Experian credit file for free in the app, helping protect you against identity theft. Make sure your finances are always in good shape with Experian. Use the link in the description or scan the QR code on your screen to download the free app. Results will vary. Additional terms may apply. See App Store for details. Here's part of a conversation a deputy had with a contractor who showed up 10 days after Hackman likely died and found the couple's bodies inside.
You're gonna go in the house? I don't.
Nobody went in the house, right? Nobody went in?
No,
Nobody went in.
No, EMTs went in.
The EMTs were the first ones
They're
in.
very brief. Just
brief, and I
the
told them we
medics.
weren't supposed to go in, and they were like, okay, because I was like, he could be in there, we don't know. I've got a way to get a hold of his kids,
Okay.
and so a friend of theirs, I got a hold of him. He's got a hold of the lady that's in charge of the estate, and she's saying that she just talked to Betsy a couple of days ago, so I don't see how, but she wants you to call her.
Yeah, we will. We're just trying to, because
You got a
who
piece
they
of
are.
paper that I can
I
write
don't
down?
have one on me. I just
Okay.
want to keep this limited
Oh yeah,
as
definitely.
much as possible,
Their
because once this
privacy
gets out,
was
we
up.
know.
you know how this is going to turn with the,
I
you
know.
know. So we got to figure out what's going on first. My concern is a carbon monoxide issue
Kelly,
right now.
Kelly, yeah, she knows.
So I want to have them
Joey,
test.
do you want to come up here?
Sure.
Because I'm going to need help with the dogs, and you can give them this
So
information.
her family's been notified, okay? They know that
Okay, yeah, come
what's
on now.
happened up here. Her family.
Okay, all right.
He has a couple of kids,
Okay.
okay, that from previous.
Right.
They didn't have any kids together. And
Okay, well,
we
let's-
just
let's-
now found a way to get in contact
Right,
with
let's
their
just try to
kids.
limit
Yeah,
any.
oh, yeah,
I
no,
was
no,
telling
no.
everyone, we were telling the EMT guys, look, you guys, please don't tell
Yeah.
anybody. And so anyone that I'm involving is close, because I worked for him for 16 years. Everything
And
was
see, and
tight,
I've worked
tight,
for him
knit.
for 28, and the bottom line was, don't ever mention our name.
Right.
Privacy was.
No, that's understandable. Like I said, we
Yeah.
just want to figure out what's going on,
Oh, sure, no, I understand.
because that's going
I
to be the
understand.
question, what happened, and we need to figure that out.
Right, yeah.
So,
yeah.
but first thing is the safety of being inside of there.
Sure,
Yeah.
of course,
know,
of
so-
course, of course.
Are you going to do a carbon monoxide?
You're having fire come back up.
Okay.
So, but then, like I said, I'm gonna have another detective coming out, and at that point, they'll probably interview you guys a little bit more in depth,
Sure,
and then we'll go from there.
sure.
Okay.
Sure.
So just
Very
hang
good.
tight.
Oh,
Thank
no
you.
problem.
The documents also show why the Hackmans may have become so secluded. A lead that ended up not pertaining to the investigation was an anecdote from Arakawa's hairdresser about a man who had followed her and Gene Hackman on multiple occasions, asking for autographs and photos in a way that made Betsy uncomfortable. From the very beginning, deputies were concerned that carbon monoxide could have been the cause of death. We see multiple times in the newly released documents that deputies and firefighters were talking about that possibility. And in body cam footage released outside the house, we hear deputies talking about those concerns.
Thing's got a big vent, comes out right by the front door, so I don't know about
Well, that's
that.
kind of where he is, though, right?
By the front door?
Yeah.
Well, no, it comes out through the roof. That big vent,
Well, it smells like it in the kitchen, though. That's the only thing.
yeah, there's nothing in the kitchen that can make enough carbon monoxide. The only thing is the range. I'm try with these first. It's best to check it.
Yeah, I'm like, unless
thing is-
it could have been a slow leak for a while, though.
There was a minor gas stove leak in the kitchen, but tests for CO poisoning came back negative. These newly released documents are part of what was at the center of a recent court hearing between the Hackman estate and media organizations. Hackman's estate and family argued against this information being released.
The public does not have an open-ended right to exploit the material for personal gain, and in violation of the privacy rights of the Hackman estates in particular, there simply is no legitimate government purpose for releasing this material at this time. A preliminary injunction is the only proper remedy in this matter. If the requested videos, photos, and cam records are released, the estate has no assurance of how the material will be used. A bell cannot be unrung.
Hackman's estate also raised questions about whether releasing the body cam video from inside the house could create security concerns at the $3.3 million mansion where the couple lived. People reported that Betsy Arakawa's mom, Yoshi Feaster, put a statement in court documents trying to block graphic photos from being released. It says, quote, "I humbly come before this court to request that this court respect my right to grieve in peace and find that I have a constitutional right to avoid seeing images of my daughter's home, her dead body, her husband's dead body, and their dog's corpse. The public spectacle surrounding my daughter's death is one that no parent should have to live through." The judge ruled that the body cam video from inside Hackman's home can be released, but you will not see images of Hackman or his wife's bodies. For as rare as hantavirus is, Betsy Arakawa Hackman is not the only person to die from that rare disease this year. In the town of Mammoth Lakes, California, 3 people died from hantavirus in April. Mammoth Lakes, it's a small town. It's known for its hiking and skiing areas in the Sierra Nevada mountains. On April 3rd, the Mono County public health officer put out this statement saying the third person who died didn't live in a home where there was mouse activity, but they did see some of that at his place of work. While that case is unrelated to Hackman's, it's notable because of how Betsy Arakawa Hackman died. Joining us now from Santa Fe, New Mexico is criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor John Day. Great to have you as always on Law and Crime. Where we see this body cam video and where this investigation, it's not far from where you are. I want to start first with just some of the reports about the presence of rats on the property. And that's notable because of how Betsy Arakawa died from hantavirus. Is that uncommon in Santa Fe for someone to have a rat issue like that on their property?
You know, so it's relatively rare for someone to die of hantavirus. Hantavirus is a potentially fatal disease that's carried by the droppings and the urine of mice and rats, rodents. And it's a common issue here in Santa Fe because the landscape here, I don't know if you saw the video, the pictures of the Hackman property, but that's what a lot of this place looks like. There's pinon juniper trees, there's brush. People are very conscious of hantavirus because if you get it, there's like a 50% survival rate. So it's something that if you live here, you're aware of it, and you try to keep the rodent population down. Otherwise, you're gonna, potentially face a problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's scary to think too with it can be passed through air particles, which after Betsy Arakawa passed, I mean, what has the mood been like around Santa Fe surrounding hantavirus? I mean, was that something that people were already aware of before this story started making headlines?
Yeah, people are aware of it, but Betsy Arakawa's death certainly highlighted the issue for us because it's this time of year, the rodents, the mice are coming out of hibernation, they're running around. What the situation was at the Hackman property was they had these outbuildings with rodent nests. Now, apparently there was nothing in the main property, but if you have any, land here in the hills and the foothills of Santa Fe, if you have any garden sheds, you have any garages, you have any even guest houses, if you're not on top of the keeping those places clean, what happens is you get these mice and rodent infestations, and then it's their droppings, their urine. It's when you're cleaning up that mess, when you're actually if you're doing sweeping or vacuuming, that's when the particles get put into the air, and that's when people inhale them. That's when they get the hantavirus. And so there are these protocols about cleaning out your buildings, cleaning out your property. You're supposed to wet it down with a bleach formula. You're supposed to make sure that the whatever you're sweeping is wet and moist, and that keeps the particles down. So this was certainly unusual, but it sort of reignites people's concern about hantavirus this time of year in this part of the country.
Yeah, and especially the part for me, because I had never heard of it before. So when the medical examiner said that this is how she died, like that was not what I was expecting when that announcement was made. But, it starts as flu-like symptoms. And apparently Betsy Arakawa, she had talked to a clinic on the 12th, which is believed to be the day that she passed. She did some Google searches about how do you treat some of these flu symptoms that she potentially was dealing with. So that's certainly a scary part of it. I want to turn now to some of the other pieces of information that came in this release by the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office. And we see the body cam video. We see deputies go through this home. You know this house from the outside. They were a very secluded couple. What stood out to you as we start to see what the inside of the house looked like after the deaths of this couple?
You know, it was a bit of a surprise and a bit sad in the way. I mean, this was the house looked cluttered. Obviously, it looked like a hoarder residence. But then you think, look, this was I think a 65-year-old woman taking care of a 90-plus-year-old man with apparently with Alzheimer's. And you know, you certainly got a lot of sympathy for what she was going through. The house certainly, to an outsider, the house looked like it was not. There were a lot of issues with, you know, putting stuff away with what they had in there. But at the end of the day, anyone who's been around or tried to care for somebody in that state knows that it's difficult. And while that was a shock, we also didn't see anything that was particularly, you know, gruesome, because the court in this case, actually, there was a battle over whether this stuff was going to be released. Normally, in any other death situation, it's all public record. In this particular case, a local judge decided that the sheriff's office could release most of what they had. They couldn't release anything that was a depiction of the bodies, and that was sort of a compromise.
Yeah, and you can just tell because of, I mean, this was such a mystery when you think back to the end of February when this story first started, and it was even the deputies going through the house and just they're trying to figure out what happened because there was just no signs of foul play, there was no signs of trauma in the home or a forced entry. When it came to the argument over whether to release the body cam, and I know I'm sure from clients that you've had, maybe they're arrested for a DUI and they know that somewhere out there, and we've aired some of the video when you know, in those types of cases, when it's relevant to put on the air. What is the argument typically surrounding body cam and whether it can be released?
Right. Well, in any other case, this is public. We have a pretty good public records law here in New Mexico. News outlets get this stuff all the time. Lawyers get this stuff all the time. The public can get this stuff. In this particular case, the Hackman family, the Hackman estate, went into court and tried to get a temporary restraining order, an injunction against the sheriff's office and the medical investigator. They were trying to preclude the release of basically the reports into the death and any autopsy reports, any postmortem investigation. And so local news outlets and actually national news outlets also contested this. They said, look, this is an issue that's got a lot of public interest. In any other situation, this would not be an issue. We're not planning on, you know, broadcasting gruesome, disturbing images, but this is stuff that people have a right to because it's the public's business, with the sheriff's office involved and the medical investigators involved. And generally, the case law around the country is that if you're deceased, you don't have a privacy interest. I mean, that's almost consistent throughout all the jurisdictions in the U.S. that if you're deceased, there's no such thing as invasion of privacy. The most recent case, the one that stands out, was the Kurt Cobain murder, or the suicide. Kurt Cobain's suicide. A local judge in Washington State said, "Look, you can release everything here, but you can't release the gruesome photos of his body after he was dead." And that's pretty much the path that the judge here in Santa Fe followed.
Yeah, you bring an interesting point there, because the sheriff's office, that is a public organization that is paid for with taxpayer dollars. As you watch this video, you're seeing how these public servants go about these types of cases. So I do see a lot of value in that. Gene Hackman also, I mean, we obviously know him as a legendary actor. Does the status of the person who died, like in this case of Kurt Cobain and how famous he was in a case that did not involve foul play, very similar situation with no foul play here involving Gene Hackman. How does that profile factor into a judge's decision? Does it factor at all into the decision of whether video like this is released?
Yeah, good question, Chris. So the judge in this case, I think he was basically following the pattern set in the Cobain suicide situation. But again, any other case, and look, as a lawyer, I've gotten body cam reports. I've gotten, there's a reason. If you have a legitimate reason for this, there's a reason you need that sometimes in a case, in an investigation, whether it's a prosecution or a defense or a civil lawsuit. In this particular case, if it hadn't been Gene Hackman, if it had been Gene Jones or somebody like that, it wouldn't have come up. This stuff would have been released, no problem. But the problem is here you have outlets, ranging from, New York Times, USA Today to TMZ to other, a wide range of media outlets who have an interest in this. And, Gene Hackman was an incredibly well-known and well-liked person. And, locally, he was incredibly well-liked. He kept to himself, but people knew him as a local person. There was a lot of respect for him. So there wasn't a lot of prurient interest in terms of, I think, locally and getting access to it. But it's also the idea that, if you're a celebrity, do you have a certain heightened level of interest in protecting your privacy even after you're dead? And as I said, most courts around the country have said consistently, unfortunately, the right to privacy doesn't survive you after you're deceased.
Yeah, and for as much as people talked about this couple being so secluded, there was an anecdote in the documents released where it was a lead that went to nowhere, but it was Betsy Arakawa's hairdresser saying that she had talked about someone stalking them in recent years. And you can just, when you live that public life, understand why they wanted to be so secluded. I know you're not far from the Hackman house. You live in Santa Fe. I mean, what's the mood, or what is it like right now if someone were to drive up or get as close as they possibly could to that property?
Right. I'm about 2 miles from the Hackman property. It's a really lovely foothill area. Actually, their particular area is it's gated. They don't have a full-time security person, but you have to have access to get in. And it was very private. And if you talk to people who knew them or worked with them around town over the years, sort of one of the themes is they wanted to be private. They weren't snobs. They weren't trying to exclude themselves from the community because they were involved in a lot of things around town. You'd see Gene Hackman and his wife at restaurants all the time. Nobody bothered them. I mean, they kept to themselves, and people respected that. But it certainly was. It's been the mood is one of sadness around town because he was a well-respected guy, had an amazing body of work, and as a local person in Santa Fe, he was out there. He would go into restaurants. People didn't bug him, but he was also very friendly. I mean, I know people who own restaurants where he would go often, and they said he's just like one of the nicest guys, and he was always willing to talk to people who came up to him. But one of the nice things about this town is people tend to leave you alone if you're trying to escape, say, LA, San Francisco, New York. This is not a bad place to do it.
Yeah, and it is a story that I feel like each time there's new pieces of information, it just gets a little sadder and sadder when you realize how the life of Gene Hackman came to an end, how the life of his wife came to an end. For that house now and some of the assets, I think about, okay, we have the body cam video. We know that it was released. The details of the timeline of what happened, that seems to be pretty set in stone. As far as remaining questions that are unanswered, one for me would be, what happens to this house now?
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming the estate will address it, obviously clean up what's there, and the family will deal with that. I know there's a will. There's certainly issues about that are going on in terms of the family. But at the end of the day, it was just a sad ending, especially with this, poor Betsy dying of hantavirus, which is always present here, but you don't think about it if you live here, as long as you sort of keep down the rodent population, as long as you are cleaning out your buildings on your property, you're not letting the rats and the mice multiply to a large extent. But the fact that that's what killed her is so sad. And then the idea that Gene Hackman apparently survived in his state of mind, which was a level of dementia, without his caretaker for several days. I mean, that's, it is heartbreaking. And for the people around here, it's the loss of a person who was a couple who were well respected, who kept to themselves, but were certainly part of the community.
Yeah, and I know that they were, at least according to People magazine, recently laid to rest, and there were questions about their bodies being claimed, but that seems to have been set in stone. I know trusts and estates, that's not your area of law, but typically how long does it take if someone were to say, actually, one of the children maybe opposes what was laid out in the trust? I mean, how long could it take for something like that to eventually be resolved?
Yeah, man, potentially this could drag on if there is some kind of a battle. I'm not sure that we haven't heard publicly of a lot of contention between the sides, but remember, you have Gene Hackman's family, and then you have Betsy Arakawa's family, and it looks like from the instrument that I saw that she was the beneficiary of his estate, and whether there's some kind of claim going on behind the scenes, I think that certainly remains to be seen. But again, when you go back to the pictures that we saw, the video of the interior of the house, and you realize that this was it was probably a full-time job taking care of him and taking care of that property. I know there were landscape people, security guards, things like that. But when you look at the interior of the house, you realize that she had a lot of work on her hands taking care of not only that property, but also her husband, who was in an advanced state of Alzheimer's, apparently.
Yeah, advanced stages of Alzheimer's, as well as having issues with, he had high blood pressure, according to the initial autopsy. And then the medical examiner said he passed from a combination of dementia, but also having heart disease as well. It's a sad ending to a story that was such a mystery in the beginning. Certainly some new reporting coming in with these documents from the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office. John Day, a criminal defense attorney in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Thank you for taking the time and helping us break this down. We appreciate it.
Good to see you, Chris.
For On the Case, presented by Law and Crime, I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.